For tuning in for another episode of Math with Mullins. Today we're going to look at our Unit 2 quiz review, which has conjectures, conditional statements, and some converse, inverse, contrapositive, biconditionals. So let's go ahead and get started with our first example. It says, number 1, write a conjecture that describes the pattern in each sequence, and use your conjecture to find the next three terms. So the conjecture we can say here is each sequence is multiplied by 3 to get the next number. So the next three terms could be 162 times 3, then we get 486, then times 3 we get 1458. Okay? For this conjecture, kind of wordy, but I would say every other sequence is a letter moving in reverse ABC order, and every other number between the two letters, or between the letters, is decreasing by 1. So the next three terms would be W, then -4, and then V. Okay? Onward, identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. So hypothesis, it would be I am in Omaha. The conclusion, I am in Nebraska. Okay? Number 2, hypothesis, I do my homework. And then the conclusion, I will pass the quiz. Number 3, rewrite the sentence in if-then form. So, if you are a baseball player, then you are an athlete. And then even numbers are divisible by 2. If a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. Next, we have conditional statement. So if-then, the converse, inverse, contrapositive, and then biconditional. We want to write the notation for each one of these, so I'm going to write that for us. So a conditional statement can be written as P then Q. The converse of that would be Q then P. The inverse would be not P then not Q. And the contrapositive would be not Q then not P. And then biconditional is when we have P with a double arrow, then Q. That just stands for P if and only if Q. So now that we have that, we're going to use that information to write the conditional statement in if-then form, write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the conditional statement, deciding whether each statement is true or false. So let's start with if-then form. So I'm going to go to the next page. If an angle measures 155 degrees, then the angle is an obtuse angle. And we're going to say that is if-then form. Okay, so now let's put it in the converse. That's Q then P. So if an angle is obtuse, then the angle measures 155 degrees. This would be considered false because sometimes you can have an obtuse angle that's 156 degrees or 142 degrees, okay? The inverse would just be the negation of the conditional. If an angle is not 155 degrees, then the angle is not an obtuse angle. That would also be false because you can have other means of that. So like just because it's not 155 doesn't mean it's not obtuse. We can have 142, 156, 91. Contrapositive is the inverse of the converse. So if an angle is not obtuse, then the angle does not measure 155 degrees. That would also be false. Okay? So not obtuse doesn't necessarily mean it has to be equal to 155. Onward to number 6. Write the converse of the true conditional statement. If the converse is also true, write the statements as a biconditional statement. If the converse is false, provide a counterexample. So, if a polygon has 3 sides, then it's a triangle. So, the converse of that would be if a polygon is a triangle, then it has 3 sides. Okay? That is true. So, to write the biconditional, we would say a polygon has 3 sides if and only if it is a triangle. Okay? If a polygon is a square, then it has 4 sides. So, the converse of that, if a polygon has 4 sides, then it is a square. That is false. You could have a polygon that could have 4 sides and be a trapezoid, right? That would be considered not a square. Number 7, use the law of detachment to determine what you can conclude from the given information if possible. If a point divides a line segment into 2 congruent line segments, then the point is the midpoint. Point P divides LH into 2 congruent line segments. So what we can conclude from this is point P is the midpoint because it uses the definition of midpoint. Going onward to number 8, we're on our last page here. Use the law of syllogism to write a new conditional statement that follows from the pair of true statements if possible. If a figure is a square, then the figure has 4 congruent sides. If the figure is a square, then the figure has 4 right angles. This is not possible because a conclusion and a hypothesis need to match. So right now, the hypothesis here, then the figure has 4 congruent sides. We should have started with that on our next conditional statement. 9, given the conditional statement, write its converse, inverse, and contrapositive in symbolic notation. This one's a good practice. So converse just means switching the hypothesis and conclusion. So I'm going to say Q, then not P. The inverse is negating the conditional statement. So the negation of not P would be P, and the negation of Q would be not Q. And then the contrapositive is the negation of the converse. So we would say not Q, then P. Okay? Last one, create your own if-then statement to write its converse, inverse, and contrapositive in sentence form. So I'm going to write a conditional statement based off of our current geometry class. If you have first period math as an Olympian, then you are
This is just a
in
reminder that
honors
yearbook
geometry.
applications are due to Ms. Siski or Ms. Stanker by the end of the day on Monday,
Thank you.
September 15th. And just remember, you have to have 2 teacher recommendations.
Okay, great. Then the converse of that would just be switching around those things. If you are in geometry, then you have first, or we can even say if you are in Olympian geometry, then you have math first period. The inverse of that, so negating the conditional. If you do not have first period math as an Olympian, then you are not in honors geometry. Let me fix the first because that's going to bother me. And then contrapositive, negate that converse. If you are not in Olympian geometry, then you do not have first period math, or math first period, okay? That is going to conclude our quiz review on Unit 2 with statements, hypothesis, conclusion, syllogism, detachment, all that fun stuff. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully this helps you get ready for your quiz, and good luck tomorrow on your quiz. Have a great day.